The last shift. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner had been flickering for 3 weeks, casting shadows that danced across the cracked vinyl booths like ghosts of better days. Sarah Martinez had noticed them her first night on the job, had even mentioned it to Frank, the owner, who'd just shrugged and said the whole place was held together with duct tape and prayers. She hadn't realized how true that was until tonight, when everything fell apart in the most unexpected way imaginable. Sarah's fingers trembled as she tied the apron strings behind her back for what she thought would be her final shift. At 23, she'd already lived more lifetimes than most people twice her age. The bruise on her left cheekbone had faded to a sickly yellow-green, barely visible under the foundation she'd carefully applied that evening. 3 months ago, she'd fled across 2 state lines with nothing but a duffel bag and the clothes on her back, leaving behind an engagement ring and a man whose love had slowly transformed into something unrecognizable and terrifying. Murphy's diner sat on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, where Route 60 stretched toward the mountains, like a ribbon of broken dreams. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee at 3 in the morning, where travelers grabbed greasy burgers between destinations, where nobody asked too many questions and everyone paid in cash. For Sarah, it had been a sanctuary, a place where she could disappear into the rhythm of orders and the clatter of dishes, where the weight of her past couldn't quite reach her during those 8-hour shifts. But sanctuary costs money, and money was something Sarah had run out of 3 days ago. The motel room she'd been renting by the week was due again tomorrow, and her paycheck wouldn't come until Friday. She'd already skipped 2 meals today, telling herself it was fine, that she'd been through worse, that somehow she'd figure it out. She always did. The dinner rush had been particularly brutal that Thursday evening. A tour bus had broken down half a mile up the road, dumping 40 irritable passengers into the diner all at once, their complaints about the heat and the delay echoing off the walls. Sarah had moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her smile never faltering, even as her feet screamed in protest and her stomach cramped with hunger. She'd learned long ago that survival meant keeping your head down and your mask firmly in place. She was refilling coffee for a trucker in booth 7 when they walked in, 3 men in their mid-20s, loud and already reeking of alcohol, even though it was barely 7 o'clock. The tallest one, wearing a stained baseball cap backwards, knocked over the specials board as he entered, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. His companions joined in, their voices carrying that particular edge of aggression that made Sarah's survival instincts kick into high gear. Just take their order and stay calm, she whispered to herself, approaching their booth with menus and water glasses balanced on her tray. 30 more minutes and you're done. You can handle 30 more minutes. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The man in the baseball cap looked her up and down with eyes that made her skin crawl. "Well, well," he drawled, his words slurring slightly. "Looks like the scenery just improved considerably, boys." Sarah kept her voice steady and professional. "Welcome to Murphy's. Can I start you gentlemen off with something to drink? How about your number, sweetheart?" One of the others chimed in, and they all erupted in laughter again. She'd dealt with this before. Every waitress had. You laugh it off, you deflect, you keep things light, and usually they get bored and move on. "I'll give you folks a minute to look at the menu," she said, her smile fixed in place as she turned to leave. That's when she felt the hand grab the back of her shirt. "Where do you think you're going?" Baseball cap yanked hard, and Sarah heard the fabric rip before she felt the cool air on her back. She spun around, instinctively clutching at her torn shirt, her carefully constructed composure cracking as genuine fear flooded through her. The diner had gone quiet. 40 pairs of eyes watched as Sarah stood there, her white tank top visible through the tear that ran from her collar to mid-back, her work shirt hanging in tatters. The 3 men were laughing hysterically now, high-fiving each other like they'd just pulled off the prank of the century. "Oh man, did you see her face?" one of them gasped between fits of laughter. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. She'd cried enough for one lifetime. She opened her mouth, though she had no idea what words would come out, when a voice cut through the laughter like a knife through butter. "You boys think that's funny?" The voice came from the corner booth, where a man Sarah had barely noticed sat nursing a cup of coffee. He was probably in his 40s, with close-cropped grey hair and a face that looked like it had seen its share of hard living. But it was what he was wearing that made Baseball Cap and his friends suddenly stop laughing, a black leather vest adorned with patches and insignia that Sarah didn't fully understand but whose meaning was unmistakable. The man stood slowly, deliberately, and Sarah noticed for the first time that he wasn't alone. 3 other men in similar vests emerged from various corners of the diner, moving with a coordinated precision that suggested this wasn't their first rodeo. The patches on their vests read Hell's Angels MC in bold letters, and beneath that, Phoenix Chapter. "I asked you a question," the first man repeated, his voice never rising above a conversational tone but somehow commanding absolute attention. "Do you think ripping a woman's shirt off is funny?" Baseball Cap had sobered up considerably. "Hey man, we were just joking around. We didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't mean anything?" The biker's jaw tightened. "You humiliated this young lady in front of everyone here, damaged her property and assaulted her. But you didn't mean anything by it. Look, we'll just leave, okay? We don't want any trouble." "Oh, you'll leave," another biker said, this one younger with a scar running down his left cheek. "But not before you make this right." Sarah found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "It's okay, really. I just want them to go." The first biker turned to look at her, and something in his expression softened. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's not okay. These boys need to learn that actions have consequences." He turned back to the 3 men, who had pressed themselves against their booth like they might disappear into the vinyl. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to this lady. Then you're going to pay for her shirt. Actually, you're going to pay for a whole new uniform. And you're going to leave a tip that's going to make up for the wages she'll lose while she's dealing with the trauma you just caused her. How does $500 sound?" $500? Baseball Cap sputtered. "That's insane." "You're right," the biker said thoughtfully. "Make it 1,000. The price just went up for back talk." One of the other troublemakers pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. Okay. We're sorry. We're really sorry." He threw several bills on the table and practically ran for the door, his friends scrambling after him. The diner remained silent for a long moment after they'd gone. Then Frank, the owner, started clapping, and soon the entire restaurant joined in. Sarah stood frozen, still clutching her torn shirt, unable to process what had just happened. The first biker approached her gently, his expression concerned. "Miss, are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over, and she was mortified to be crying in front of all these people, in front of these intimidating strangers, who had just stood up for her when no one else had. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. My name's Tommy. Why don't you sit down for a minute? You look like you might pass out." He guided her to an empty booth, and one of the other bikers brought her a glass of water. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted it to her lips, her mind racing through everything that had just happened, everything that could have happened. "I'm fine," she finally managed. "Thank you. Thank you." Tommy slid into the booth across from her. "Don't thank me yet. I want you to count that money they left." Sarah looked at the crumpled bills on the table where the men had been sitting. With trembling fingers, she straightened them out and counted. $800 in cash, more money than she'd seen in months. Enough to pay for her motel room, to buy groceries, to breathe for just a little while longer. "I can't take this," she whispered, even as everything in her screamed that she needed it desperately. "Yes, you can," Tommy said firmly. "They owed you that and more. Consider it compensation for what they put you through." Frank appeared at the table carrying Sarah's jacket. "Sarah, honey, why don't you take the rest of the night off? We're slowing down anyway, and Maria can cover your section." "But I need the hours," Sarah protested weakly. "I'll pay you for the full shift," Frank assured her. "Those boys shook you up pretty good. Go home and rest." Tommy studied Sarah's face for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Where's home for you, if you don't mind me asking?" Something in the way he asked made Sarah's carefully constructed walls crumble just a little. "The Desert Rose Motel, about 2 miles up the road." "That place is a dump," one of the other bikers said. Then immediately looked apologetic. "Sorry, I just mean, it's not safe, especially for a woman alone." "It's what I can afford," Sarah said quietly, and in those 5 words, she felt like she'd revealed more about herself than she'd intended. Tommy exchanged glances with his companions, and some unspoken communication passed between them. "Tell you what," he said, turning back to Sarah. "My sister runs a boarding house on the north side. Clean rooms, safe neighborhood, home-cooked meals included. She's always looking for good tenants. I could give her a call if you're interested." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, to maintain her independence, to not accept charity from strangers. But as she sat there in her torn shirt, counting $800 that had been essentially extorted on her behalf by a group of bikers, she realized that maybe, just maybe, accepting help wasn't the same as giving up. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." Tommy's expression grew distant for a moment, like he was looking at something far away. "I had a little sister once," he said slowly. "About your age, actually. She got mixed up with the wrong guy, the kind who thought he owned her, who thought he had the right to hurt her whenever he felt like it." He paused, and Sarah could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "She didn't make it out. By the time we realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, some barrier she'd built around herself beginning to crack. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Me too," Tommy said. "Every day. But I learned something from losing Katie. I learned that sometimes people need help, and sometimes the universe puts you in a position to give it. I wasn't there for my sister, but I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and watch someone else go through what she did." Sarah realized then that Tommy had seen things in her face that she'd thought she'd hidden so well. The fear that lingered behind her eyes, the way she'd flinched when baseball cap had grabbed her, the desperate edge to her situation that spoke of someone running from something. He'd recognized it because he'd seen it before in someone he loved. "The guy I left," Sarah heard herself saying, surprised by her own voice. "He said I'd never make it on my own, that I needed him, that I was nothing without him." She looked down at the money on the table, then at the group of strangers who had stood up for her when they had absolutely no reason to. "I'm starting to think he was wrong." "He was wrong," Tommy said with absolute certainty. "You got yourself out, you got yourself here, you got yourself a job. That takes more strength than most people ever need to have. You're a survivor, Sarah. Don't let anyone tell you different." The tears came again, but this time they felt different, cleaner somehow, like they were washing away something toxic that had been poisoning her from the inside. One of the other bikers, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, handed her a napkin without a word. "So," Tommy said, after giving her a moment to compose herself, "what do you say about that phone call to my sister? No pressure, but I really do think you'd like Rose. She's good people, and she's helped more than a few women get back on their feet over the years." Sarah thought about the Desert Rose Motel, with its stained carpets and locks that didn't quite work, about the sound of arguments through paper-thin walls at 2 in the morning, about the way she checked the parking lot 3 times before getting out of her car every night. She thought about home-cooked meals and a safe neighborhood and maybe, just maybe, a chance to catch her breath and figure out what came next. "Okay," she said, and it felt like opening a door she'd been afraid to even approach. "I'd like that." "Thank you." Tommy smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Don't mention it. Now let me call Rose and we'll get this sorted out." He pulled out his phone and walked toward the door, already dialing. Sarah sat in the booth, surrounded by these unlikely guardian angels in their leather vests, and realized that she'd been wrong about something fundamental. She'd thought strength meant doing everything alone, that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. But maybe real strength was recognizing when you needed support and having the courage to accept it when it was offered. The other bikers drifted back to their various tables, giving her space but maintaining a protective presence that made Sarah feel safer than she had in years. Frank brought her a piece of pie on the house and told her to take all the time she needed. Regular customers who'd witnessed the incident stopped by to make sure she was okay, and more than one person left a generous tip for the brave waitress in booth 5. By the time Tommy returned, Sarah had composed herself, though her shirt was still torn and her emotions still raw. "Good news," he said, sliding back into the booth. "Rose has a room available, and she says you can move in tomorrow if you want. First month is on me, don't argue," he added when Sarah opened her mouth to protest. "Consider it payment for all the free coffee. I'm about to drink while I make sure those idiots don't come back here." "You're going to stay?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Me and the boys have decided Murphy's Diner makes a good spot for our Thursday night meetups," Tommy said with a wink. "We'll be around. Just to make sure everyone stays respectful, you understand." Sarah understood that what he was really saying was that she would be protected, that she wouldn't have to face whatever came next alone. The weight of that gift, of safety, of community, of human kindness from the most unexpected source, was almost overwhelming. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You already did," Tommy replied. "You survived. You kept going. You didn't let them break you tonight. And I'm guessing you haven't let anyone break you for a long time. That's enough." As Sarah drove to her motel that night, the $800 safely tucked in her purse, she thought about the strange and unpredictable nature of human connection. She'd been so focused on staying invisible, on not drawing attention, on handling everything herself that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, really seen, and to have someone care about what they saw. The next day, she moved into Rose's boarding house, a cheerful Victorian with a wraparound porch and flower boxes in every window. Rose turned out to be exactly as Tommy had described, warm, no nonsense, and possessing an uncanny ability to know when someone needed to talk and when they needed to be left alone. The other tenants were a mix of people in various stages of rebuilding their lives, and Sarah found an unexpected sense of belonging in their shared stories of survival and resilience. True to his word, Tommy and his crew became regular fixtures at Murphy's Diner every Thursday night. They never made a big deal of it, but their presence changed the atmosphere of the place. People were more respectful, more aware, more conscious of treating the staff with basic human decency. Sarah's tips improved, not just on Thursdays, but every night, as word spread about what had happened, and the community rallied around the young waitress, who'd been terrorized by drunk bullies. 3 months later, Sarah was still working at the diner, but she'd also enrolled in community college classes to finish her degree in social work. She'd found a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors, and slowly, painfully, she was learning to trust again, to trust herself most of all. The bruises had faded completely, both the visible ones and some of the invisible ones too. On a Thursday night in early spring, as Sarah refilled Tommy's coffee cup for the 3rd time, he looked up at her with that familiar warm smile. "You look different," he observed. "Happy, maybe?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Was she happy? She was still healing, still figuring things out, still dealing with nightmares and moments of paralyzing fear. But she also had a safe place to live, friends who cared about her, goals for the future, and most importantly, she had herself back. "Getting there," she said honestly. "Thanks to you." "Nah," Tommy said, shaking his head. "This is all you, kid. We just gave you a little push. You did the hard part." But Sarah knew better. She'd learned that night that we all need someone to stand up for us sometimes, that accepting help doesn't make you weak, and that the most unlikely people can become your fiercest protectors. She'd learned that community isn't just something that exists. It's something you build, one small act of kindness at a time. As she moved through the diner that evening, taking orders and sharing smiles, Sarah Martinez felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone drowning, but the solid, grounded hope of someone who knows that no matter what storms come, they won't have to weather them alone. The fluorescent lights still flickered overhead, and the vinyl booths were still cracked. But Murphy's Diner had become something more than just a workplace. It had become a testament to the power of human decency, to the importance of standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, and to the beautiful, unexpected ways that strangers can become family. And somewhere out there, Sarah liked to think, Katie was watching her brother turn his grief into something purposeful, something that mattered. The pain of loss had been transformed into a protective force, ensuring that other sisters, other daughters, other women would have someone in their corner when tea